So if a patient's chart says something like, the IV infiltrated, the nurse restarted it, you'd probably just think, okay, that's just a regular clinical update, right?
Right, yeah. The meaning seems perfectly clear.
Yeah. But on the TEAS nursing exam, and, well, honestly, potentially in a malpractice lawsuit, that exact sentence is a catastrophic failure.
Oh, absolutely. It's a complete disaster.
Welcome to this custom deep dive. Today, our mission is to demystify what, probably sounds like the absolute driest exam prep topic on earth.
Which is sentence structure.
Exactly. Specifically, we're talking about the simple, compound, and complex sentence types that you are absolutely guaranteed to see on nursing entrance exams.
And, I mean, it's incredibly common to look at those grammar requirements, see all the academic jargon, and just feel this massive wave of dread.
Oh, for sure.
Because, we want language to just feel natural, right? Visible. But suddenly this exam is forcing you to categorize literally every single word you write.
Right, but for you listening right now, this is about so much more than just passing some multiple choice test. We're actually we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden architecture of human communication itself.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
We're going to look at the secret formulas behind famous speeches, why rigid grammar rules quite literally save lives on the hospital floor, and this is wild, how a 2,000-year-old teaching method ended up on your modern computerized nursing exam. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We really have to start with the raw materials first, right? Like the atomic building blocks of a sentence.
Yeah, so fundamentally, sentence structure is just the science of combining what grammarians call propositions.
Okay, propositions.
Right. A proposition is just a single idea. It's one subject doing or being one thing. And the atomic unit that actually holds that proposition is called a clause. And to build a clause, a group of words only needs two ingredients. You just need a subject and a finite verb. But the whole grammar system basically pivots on the fact that these clauses come in two very different flavors.
Okay, so when I was looking through the source material, this visual analogy really jumped out at me for this. You can sort of think of clauses like puzzle pieces.
Oh, yeah, I love that analogy.
Right. So take an independent clause, something like, the nurse checked the chart. That is a puzzle piece with completely smooth, finished edges.
Exactly.
You can just set it down on the table all by itself, and it forms a complete picture. It makes total sense as a standalone sentence.
Yeah, that visual works perfectly because the structure itself is totally self-contained. It expresses a complete thought without relying on anything else at all. But then you have the second flavor, which is the dependent or subordinate clause.
Which would be like the puzzle piece with a jagged missing chunk cut out of it.
Yes, exactly.
Like if I say, because the nurse checked the chart,
Right.
and I just stop talking.
Right, I'm waiting for the rest of it.
Yeah, I've completely left you hanging. The edge isn't smooth. It has a subject, the nurse, and it has a verb, checked. But it doesn't express a complete thought.
No, it's desperately waiting for another puzzle piece to attach to, so the whole picture actually makes sense.
Okay, so from just those two distinct pieces, the smooth-edged independent clause and the jagged-edged dependent clause, we get this strict mathematical taxonomy for sentences.
Yeah, it operates exactly like a formula. It breaks down into four main categories. So first is the simple sentence. The formula here is just one independent clause and zero dependent clauses.
Just one smooth puzzle piece sitting on the table.
Exactly. So a clinical example would be the patient's blood pressure dropped.
Okay, simple enough.
Right. Then moving up in complexity, we get the compound sentence. This is two or more independent clauses joined together as absolute equals.
And they're usually connected by, what, the MBOYS acronym?
Yeah, exactly. For and nor, but, or yet so. Or they're glued together by semicolon. So you'd write, the patient's blood pressure dropped, so the nurse paged the physician. You've got two completely independent thoughts just balanced perfectly on a scale.
Right. Then the complex sentence comes in and starts mixing up the puzzle pieces.
Exactly. A complex sentence needs one independent clause plus at least one dependent clause. So, because the patient's blood pressure dropped, the nurse paged the physician. The dependent piece relies completely on the independent piece to function.
Which brings us to the grand finale, right?
Yeah.
The complex sentence.
It's a big one, yeah.
Which is really just stacking everything together. At least two independent clauses plus at least one dependent clause.
Yep. Because the patient's blood pressure dropped, the nurse paged the physician, and the charge nurse prepared the crash cart.
Okay, now before we move on, I want to try building one of these myself. Because I feel like the textbook makes this sound, I don't know, a little too neat.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so if I write, the nurse washed her hands and put on gloves. I have two actions happening joined by the word and. So I've just built a compound sentence.
And you have just walked directly into the absolute most common trap set by test makers.
Wait, really?
Yeah, that is not a compound sentence. That is a simple sentence with a compound verb.
Wait, how is that a simple sentence? I literally used the word and.
I know. But the word and is just a connector, right? It doesn't automatically create a compound sentence. Remember the core formula. A true compound sentence requires two full independent puzzle pieces.
Okay.
Each side of the word and must be able to stand completely alone. If we split your sentence in half, the second part is just put on gloves.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that phrase lacks a subject, who put on the gloves. Because it can't stand alone, it is not an independent clause.
Oh, wow. I see it now.
To make it a true compound sentence, you actually have to supply that second subject. The nurse washed her hands, and she put on gloves.
Okay, that is so sneaky. But it makes me wonder, if this system is supposed to be this neat mathematical formula of matching up puzzle pieces, why does it feel so unintuitive for us?
It's a great question.
Like, why do we constantly fall into traps like that compound verb? Who actually invented this rigid rule book that we're all just forced to memorize?
Well, what's fascinating here is that we struggle with it because we're essentially forcing the English language to wear clothes that were tailored for Latin.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the system you're tested on today was never actually designed for English. It grew out of ancient Mediterranean grammatical traditions. We're talking about ancient Greek scholars like Dionysius Thrax in the 2nd century BCE.
Wow.
And Latin grammarians like Priscian in the 6th century CE.
Wait, so when someone sits down in a testing center today, to take a computerized exam for nursing school, the underlying logic of the test is from 2nd century BCE Greece.
In a lot of ways, yeah. And those ancient scholars, they didn't invent these categories just for the sake of grammar. They categorized sentence structures for formal rhetoric.
Like for public speaking.
Exactly. They were training politicians and lawyers in the agora on how to manipulate sentence length and join ideas to maximize their persuasive power over a crowd.
But how does an ancient Greek debate tool become the bane of modern American public education?
Right. So we have to fast forward to the 18th century. English grammar books started modeling themselves really heavily on Latin grammar.
Because Latin was seen as fancy.
Exactly. It was viewed as the pure, perfect language of the educated elite. And a massively influential figure here was a guy named Lindley Murray. In 1795, he published an English grammar textbook that became this runaway bestseller in both Britain and the U.S. for decades. He essentially cemented this clause-based classification as the absolute backbone of how we teach English.
Which, as the source material points out, is heavily debated today, right? Like, critics actually call it a Latinate imposition.
Yeah.
Because Latin and English operate on completely fundamentally different mechanics. Latin uses case endings, so the ending of a word tells you its function in the sentence, which means you can put words in almost any order.
Yeah, right. The order doesn't matter as much.
But English doesn't do that at all.
Right.
English relies almost entirely on strict word order. Applying Latin rules to English is, well, it's like trying to use the rules of chess to play checkers.
It is a really controversial fit, and modern linguists criticize it constantly. But, and this is the key, why did it survive to end up on the TEAS and HESI A2 exams?
Let me guess. Because it's easy to grade.
Exactly, because the simple compound complex taxonomy is highly teachable and, more importantly, highly testable. When standardized public education expanded, institutions needed a framework that could be easily graded on a mass scale.
Right.
You can plug these 4 categories into a multiple choice machine and get a definitive score, totally regardless of whether it accurately reflects how human beings actually process language.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. If we know these Latin-based rules are a terrible fit for English, what happens in the brain when we force patients or tired nurses to read them? Like, what does modern science actually say happens when we process a sentence?
So modern descriptive linguistics completely abandons those 4 rigid boxes. For instance, you have systemic functional linguists, building on the work of Michael Halliday, who argue that the traditional categories completely ignore what actually matters. Cognitive load.
Cognitive load.
Right. They distinguish between structural complexity, which is just counting the clauses like we did earlier, and functional complexity, which is how hard the brain actually has to work to decode the meaning.
Oh, I see. Because a compound sentence made of 2 tiny independent clauses like she fainted and he called for help, structurally, that's compound. But functionally, a tired nurse at 3 a.m. can process that instantly.
Instantly.
It's
Yes.
compared to like a simple sentence stuffed with 20 words of dense medical jargon that takes a full minute to decode.
Precisely. You also have Noam Chomsky's transformational generative framework, which totally revolutionized linguistics in the 1950s. Chomsky models sentences as recursive tree structures.
Okay, wait, recursive tree structures sounds a bit like a computer science lecture. Can we break that down a little?
Sure, sure. Think of it like Russian nesting dolls.
Okay.
You can put a clause, inside another clause, for example. The nurse who checked the chart, which was on the desk, that sat by the door, sighed.
Wow, okay.
Right. Every time you embed a new clause, you're handing the reader's brain another open nesting doll that they literally have to hold on to until the sentence finally resolves.
And the brain only has so much working memory to hold all those open dolls.
Exactly.
Which, honestly, perfectly explains the biggest misconception test writers use against students, which is the run-on sentence. Because if you ask most people on the street, they'll tell you a run-on sentence is simply a sentence that goes on way too long and gives you too many nesting dolls.
Oh, test writers absolutely bank on that assumption. But length has absolutely zero to do with whether a sentence is a run-on. You can write a 40-word complex sentence that is grammatically flawless. As long as you use the correct conjunctions and punctuation to glue your puzzle pieces together, it is not a run-on.
But if I write something like, "The alarm sounded. The nurse ran to the room." I mean, that's only 9 words.
9 words, but structurally, it's a disaster. You've taken 2 smooth-edged, independent puzzle pieces and just smashed them against each other without any glue. No punctuation, no conjunction. That is a true run-on sentence, specifically what we call a fused sentence.
Right.
TEAS and HESI writers will put a perfectly correct 40-word sentence right next to a broken 9-word sentence as answer choices. They are testing if you actually analyze the structure or if you just lazily judge the sentence by its word count.
Man, that is incredibly sneaky. But it highlights a real-world consequence, too. Packing more clauses into a sentence doesn't automatically make it better or smarter writing.
No, not at all.
In fact, if you overstack those Russian nesting dolls, things just break down. The source material actually brings up the plain language movement, which fought for and passed the U.S. Plain Writing Act of 2010.
Right, a very important piece of legislation.
Because they recognized that bureaucratic writing stuffed with complex sentences actively degrades comprehension. It was literally causing citizens to misunderstand their legal contracts or lose housing benefits or sign away rights simply because their brains couldn't hold all the clauses open.
Yeah, it forces us to realize that grammatical correctness is necessary, but it isn't sufficient. If you construct a technically perfect complex sentence, but a patient misinterprets their discharge instructions because of the heavy cognitive load, the sentence was a failure.
Okay, so if excessive nesting dolls break the brain, but simple sentences can be way too basic for complex ideas, how do masters of communication actually balance this?
Well, they use sentence structure not as a rigid set of rules to follow, but as a deliberate rhetorical tool to manipulate the audience's attention.
Going back to the ancient Greeks.
Exactly. And the best historical example of this is Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address.
Oh, the famous opening. 77 years ago.
Right. Listen to the architecture of that first sentence. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
It's massive.
It is massive. It's an elaborately extended sentence built around one main independent clause, just layered with multiple modifying phrases. It's weighty. It forces the audience to lean in and focus.
It sets this deeply serious, almost exhausting tone, right?
Yeah.
But I guess that makes the closing line of the speech so much more impactful.
Exactly. Government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth.
Wow. That structural contrast hits the listener like a physical punch. After all that heavy lifting, a short, powerful sentence just lands with absolute finality. Lincoln clearly knew exactly what he was doing with his clause structure.
He absolutely did.
Let's pull this back to the hospital floor, though. Because for the nursing students listening, that's where this theoretical knowledge becomes highly practical. Let me try to build a clinical scenario through the 4 structures, and you correct me if I go off track.
Okay, let's see how the moving parts change the narrative.
All right, I'll start simple. The patient reported chest pain. 1 subject, 1 verb, 1 complete thought.
Structurally perfect.
Okay, now I want to show 2 equal actions happening. I'll make it compound. The patient reported chest pain, and the nurse notified the attending physician.
Great. You took 2 independent clauses, two smooth puzzle pieces and glued them together with a comma and the word and.
Okay, now let's make it complex. I need a jagged puzzle piece. When the patient reported chest pain, the nurse notified the attending physician.
Yep, by adding the word when, you subordinated the first clause. It can't stand alone anymore. It is now dependent on the second half to make sense.
Nice. Let's go for the compound complex stack. When the patient reported chest pain, the nurse notified the attending physician, and the charge nurse activated the rapid response team.
Perfect. You successfully layered one dependent clause with two independent clauses. And notice how controlling those structures allows you to clearly narrate a multi-step emergency. You're establishing the exact sequence of events and the cause and effect relationships.
Which is why this matters so deeply in a clinical handoff, right? A misplaced punctuation mark in a patient's chart isn't just a red mark on an English paper. It literally creates deadly ambiguity.
It really does.
If a nurse writes a run-on sentence like, administer 5 milligrams of morphine, monitor patient vitals dropped, the next shift doesn't know the causality. Did the vitals drop before or after the morphine? The entrance exams test this heavily because clear clause construction is, well, it's literally a patient safety skill.
When the stakes are life and death, you just cannot afford to leave the reader guessing where one thought ends and the next begins.
Okay, knowing the stakes are that high, let's get into the psychology of the test makers. If they know how these structures work, how are they going to try to trick you on the TEAS or HESI?
Oh, their favorite weapon by far is the comma splice. It usually looks something like the sentence we opened the show with. The eye infiltrated. The nurse restarted it in a new site.
But the tricky part is that it sounds completely fine when you read it out loud.
That is exactly why it works as a trap. Test makers know that most people read a comma as a breath, or a physiological pause. But grammar doesn't care about your breathing.
Right.
Grammatically, a comma is incredibly weak glue. A comma alone can never, ever join two independent clauses.
So how do we fix it?
To fix a comma splice, you have to upgrade your glue. You can add a fanboy-esque conjunction after the comma, like so. You can use a semicolon. You can replace the comma with a period and create two simple sentences. Or you can turn one of the clauses into a dependent clause.
Okay, so a breath does not equal a boundary. What about the conjunctive adverb trap? Words like however and therefore. Because people mess this up constantly in emails.
Oh, all the time. Test makers know that students treat however just like the word but, and they are not the same. Words like however, therefore, and consequently connect the meaning of two independent clauses, but they do not have the grammatical strength to actually glue them together.
Okay, so what's the rule there?
The absolute rule you must memorize is this. When joining independent clauses with a conjunctive adverb, you must put a semicolon before it and a comma after it. The patient improved, however, the family remained concerned. If you just use commas, you've created a comma splice.
That semicolon is the heavy-duty glue you need. Okay, here's one last trap. The because rule. I vividly remember a grade school teacher telling me I could never, ever start a sentence with the word because.
Yeah, that is a widespread myth born from teachers just trying to stop children from writing fragments. It is perfectly grammatically correct to start a sentence with a subordinating conjunction like because, as long as an independent clause eventually pays it off.
Right.
Because the patient was febrile, the nurse administered antipyretics. That is a flawless, complex sentence. Test makers prey on that old schoolyard fear to make you second-guess the correct answer. The only time it becomes an error is if that dependent clause is left completely alone with no independent clause to attach to.
Okay, let's recap the 5 golden rules really quickly for everyone listening. Number 1, count your independent and dependent clauses. Number 2, commas alone can't join independent clauses.
Right, and number 3, run-ons are about missing connectors, not length. Number 4, dependent clauses cannot stand alone.
And number 5, conjunctive adverbs need semicolons and commas. We have covered incredible ground today. I want to thank you for taking this deep dive with us. We've seen how understanding the architecture of a sentence allows you to outsmart a high-space exam by recognizing the traps test makers set.
Absolutely.
We've seen how it allows you to write a medically unambiguous patient chart, and even how it dictates the way our brains process information under pressure. It truly is the hidden machinery behind every connection we make.
Yeah, and as we wrap up, I want to offer a final thought for you to observe in the wild today. Think about your own digital habits, texting, email, auto-predictive typing.
Oh, yeah.
The source material notes that misplaced commas, fragmented thoughts, and run-ons are absolutely rampant in how we communicate on screens. As you send your next few text messages, look closely at the architecture you are building. Are you naturally utilizing complex structures to narrate your day? Or is the sheer speed of digital communication and the convenience of your thumbs causing you to drop conjunctions and unconsciously create run-on fusions?
That is such a fascinating point.
It really is. It's wild to consider how the technology right in our pockets might be silently rewriting the structural rules we inherited from ancient Greek debaters.